I'm Tracie Washington. I'm a recent civil rights attorney. I don't even like to profess that I am a career-long civil rights attorney. My experiences post-Hurricane Katrina, however, are what brought me to doing what I do now, which we'll talk about. And it's those experiences and the life experiences, having grown up and being raised here in New Orleans, African American, that have led me to, I won't say focus on immigrant work, because that's not what I do, but to find some kinship with the immigrant workers here and to want to help so much. Post-Hurricane Katrina, first of all, I stayed for Katrina, like so many idiots who thought that surely this hurricane move west or east or somewhere aside from New Orleans, until that Sunday when my son said, "Mom, Katrina is the size of the Gulf. It really doesn't matter where it moves." And so we stayed and evacuated first to Beaumont, and then Rita came, and we loaded up again and got to Austin. While I was in Austin, I received lots of telephone calls, but I'll never forget sitting in the living room in the house where I was staying, and received a telephone call from a dear friend of mine, Jen Lai, who said, "Tracie, it's Jen Lai. I don't know if you remember me from the education work that we've been doing." "Sure, how are you?" Pleasantries. She said, "Something horrible is going on and I need your help. I have a group of Southeast Asian women who have been enslaved in a hotel here in town, and we need some legal representation for them." So, I mean, it's, maybe 30 minutes before carpool in the afternoon, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what does that mean? You have women who have been enslaved. I said, what are you talking about? Well, after a couple more minutes, what I learned was that these women had, been told that they could come to New Orleans and work, had somehow been brought here to the United States in just that brief period of time to work, were working, doing cleanup inside a hotel, but every evening they were locked in their rooms or in wherever it was that they were sheltered in the evenings, and could not leave until the morning when they would go to work. Now, I don't know, you guys are looking at me like, that's crazy. Well, that's the way I was on the phone. That's crazy. How can that be? This was around October of 2005, and I said, that's outrageous. But here's the problem. It was October 2005. Most lawyers were still gone. Who do you call? What do you do? What do you do about the language barrier? I couldn't help them. I speak English, sometimes not so well. And we struggled with that, and ultimately there was some assistance, and I won't go into the detail about how that assistance came about, but it got me thinking. Well, if it's happening once, is it happening more than once? We'd all received the emails, when I say we, most of us who were evacuated, from hotels saying, $10 an hour, $15, $20, $25 an hour to come back to New Orleans to clean. Now, notwithstanding the fact that I'm a lawyer and, I've got these degrees, master's degree here, law degree there, $25 an hour was sounding kind of good. I just didn't want to put on a white suit and clean anybody's hotel. But lots of people thought, okay, we'll go on ahead and do that, and negotiated, some of them, for even more money. They got here, and I would hear from my friends, mostly African American, well, I got to New Orleans, They said they were going to pay us $20 an hour, $25 an hour. And we figured out, no, we're not taking that kind of money. And sometimes we would negotiate for more and get paid more money. Sometimes the employers weren't paying us the money that they said they were going to pay us. And so we just walked off the job and left. Well, as far as I'm concerned, as a labor and employment attorney almost all of my career, what those people did was exactly what the market should have you do in an instance of a catastrophe where the market says you need labor and there is a shortage of labor, and you should be able to negotiate the terms of working to your benefit. Not to the employer's detriment, but to your benefit. Now, switch gears. The people I dealt with who were not New Orleans native, but were immigrant workers, several months later would come through translators and say, we were brought to the hotels and brought to the United States and came here with H-2B visas and promised lots of things, $10, $15, $20 an hour. But we got here and the money wasn't right. They weren't actually paying the $10, $15, $20, $25 an hour. And the housing that we were promised wasn't 2 people to a room, but wound up being 8. And we're all bunked up on top of each other on floors. And we couldn't leave because we went into debt to get here through some coyote recruiters. And that H-2B visa assigns us to one employer and one employer only. It's slavery. It's indentured servitude. And so post-Hurricane Katrina in January, I began working on these cases because I thought when President Bush promised us we were going to have a new and bigger and better and brighter New Orleans when he sucked up all the electricity in Jackson Square, that meant for all of us. And when he said we weren't going to have labor conditions and living conditions in New Orleans as we'd had them prior to Hurricane Katrina, because we all knew we lived on this big old plantation where labor market rules weren't really working for poor folk in New Orleans, that those things would change. But they didn't. What happened was folks figured out, nefarious employers, that group of former residents, and mostly those low-wage African-American workers and some white workers, but those low-wage black workers are going to come back and they're going to make demands on us. And they've got enough knowledge of labor laws to know, if we work them over 40 hours a week, we got to pay them time and a half. We'll work them on the holidays, we're going to have to pay them double time. They know enough about OSHA to say OSHA. But if we go to Haiti or Mexico or Dominican Republic or Southeast Asia, those folks don't know no better. And guess what? Even if they do learn, they can't go anywhere. It's that mentality that I never thought I would see in this country. And it's that practice that we fight, one aspect of what we fight at LJI. I don't pretend to do it LJI, Louisiana Justice Institute. I don't pretend to do it by myself. I've worked with phenomenal attorneys as just local counsel, really, with the Southern Poverty Law Center. And one of the things we want to do big picture, and I tell folks all the time, I can't sue you to be moral. And this is really a moral issue. You either have to think it's okay to pay people the way you're supposed to pay them and not treat them like slaves or not. No matter how often I sue you, if you want to treat people like slaves, you're going to find a way to do it. But one of the things we work on is systemically finding those big employers, those huge violators of labor laws here along the Gulf Coast, and file class action lawsuits against them. The first case I worked on with them was a case against the Decatur Hotel Group, which involved hotel workers who'd been brought in from South and Central America and Mexico to work in the hotels post-Hurricane Katrina. Frankly, I'd never done any H-2B visa work. But when I heard about the case, all I could do was laugh. Now, when you recruit immigrants to come to the United States under the H-2B visa, you are certifying to the government, you are signing a form that says you can't find anybody here to do that work. All these mugs, all these people were brought up here to clean sheets, toilets, change beds, in hotels. And I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean you couldn't find anybody to do this work? They're staying in the hotel right now as evacuees. All the people who were evacuees, I'm sure many of them, most of them, were your former employees. What then would make you want to have immigrant workers versus those former low-wage black workers? There's only one answer. There's only one answer. The ability to exploit one group when you could not exploit another. There can be but one answer. The answer can't be, I couldn't find them. They're staying with you. I'd love to say that about my 15-year-old sometimes. I just couldn't find him. No, he's upstairs. And that was offensive to me. But we knew not only could we change the acts of this one employer, but we knew that through this litigation, and I believe this through this litigation, we can affect change concerning how the H-2B visa program is run. We've got to have better checks and balances on that. Number two, second case, is the most recent case involving Indian immigrant workers who, I guess basically the same sort of situation, but highly skilled workers being brought in and really trafficked here in the United States and exploited in ways would take a whole lecture to discuss. Again, with horrible language barriers, which makes it even more difficult than to traverse our legal system. And again, with Southern Poverty Law Center, trying to figure out ways in which to affect change, not just for these clients, but systemically with this H-2B visa program. I do this not because I want to become an immigration attorney or an immigration law expert. And sometimes some of the things I think I say are so highly explosive that I don't think real immigration attorneys would want me on their side of the bar anyway. I interviewed with one national news service, and they asked, for example, about how I felt about immigration policies and the building of fences around the United States. And I said, well, I think it's actually a very good idea to protect them from us. And the reporter thought for a second. That part didn't make the interview. Didn't work with his show. We are really the offending parties. But it's not just offending parties for immigrant workers. The reason why I take this on so passionately is because we had worker problems in New Orleans long before we had immigrant worker problems in New Orleans. We don't treat workers well here. Now, I first started practicing and I got my law degree in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas at Austin. And I know that in a community where you have industry and where you have, they have high technology and they make things, you can diversify your economy. Unfortunately for New Orleans, we are pretty much just a service industry town. We don't, well, we've got the oil industry, we've got the ports, but we don't make anything. And we tell the world that this is the place where you come to have this really good time. The problem with that is we don't seem to want to pay those people who buttress and support this economy a living wage. We don't seem to want to do anything but exploit those individuals, the hotel workers, the taxi cab drivers, the janitors, the folks that keep us running. So I thought, and we work at LJI on ways in which we can organize workers to better their conditions, organize and demand better working conditions, but organize as well to change those policies that keep them down, be it from state laws. We don't really work much on the federal level right now, but even administrative rules that keep them, in my assessment, oppressed. And it's only when we can make those changes that we will see real changes in immigration policy and worker conditions. I don't think we will change the condition for immigrant workers until we change the conditions, working conditions for workers across the board, regardless of whether they're immigrant workers. We've got to, I'll close maybe with one example. I was driving down the street one day, and I saw this woman, and I have to admit to you that I never really paid attention to this before Katrina. Young woman is going down Fontainebleau around the corner from my house, strolling some kids, middle of the afternoon. And I pulled up alongside and I said, "Hi, I'm Tracie Washington." And she said, "I know you from TV." And I said, "Thank you." She said, "Keep on doing the good work." I said, "Thank you." I said, "Let me ask you a question." It's a young African-American woman, and she had 2 little white babies in the stroller. I said, "Tell me, how much do you make?" She said, "I make $8 an hour." Now, all of you, I know you students know how much it costs to live in the city if you're in private apartments, you know, maybe $800 a month for a 1-bedroom, maybe even more. And I said, $8 an hour? Are you living with your parents? She goes, no. I got another job. You know, I have another job after this job. And I thought, wow. I said, man, that's tough. I'm really sorry to hear that. She goes, well, you know, you just got to do what you got to do. But they don't let you live with dignity and respect here. And I said, you're absolutely right. And we kind of exchanged some more pleasantries, and I drove off. And I thought 2 things. First, they don't let you live with dignity and respect. What a profound statement from a worker. But 2, this was a young woman who, if she's working 2 jobs, she's coming to you as an employer in the morning tired. And yet you have her watching the most precious, I would think the most precious thing in your life, your 2 babies. Why wouldn't you want to pay that person a living wage? Why wouldn't you want to have that person making $16 an hour so that they're refreshed and they want to come to work every day? And I started talking with you guys about how you can't sue people to be moral. There's nothing you can do to sue to make that woman's working condition any better. We have to shift the paradigm here in New Orleans and in the Gulf Coast so that folks want that young woman to live better. So that it's not an issue of, wow, what can I do legally to make her life better, so that she doesn't have to work 2 jobs, so that her working conditions are better. And that's not just something lawyers and and public interest advocates need to do. It's something that we all share a role in. We do it when someone comes and says, oh, I can clean your gutters and I can do it for $20, and they're about to get on a ladder and do it, and you have that role then to say, no, man, I'm not going to let you get on that ladder for $20. If you're going to clean my gutters, you're going to get paid at least $100. It's something I wouldn't do, and that's dangerous work. We can do this ourselves, bit by bit, and we have to. At the end of the day, we won't be able to prosper in New Orleans and along the Gulf Coast. We will not be able to recover, notwithstanding the facade of recovery that we see. We will not be able to recover unless we figure out a way to allow everyone the opportunity to prosper. Ladies and gentlemen, prosper doesn't mean we all have to be millionaires. I prosper when I'm able to take care of my family, when I have health insurance, when I don't have to have 4 jobs. And I want to leave you with that message because I think it's so very important for us to not only have it here in the halls of Tulane Law School, but to take it out in the community, proselytize, as it were. I know I'm not at Loyola, but preach that message for recovery. Recovery goes hand in hand with the opportunity for prosperity, and that opportunity for prosperity has to be given to all of our workers, immigrant workers, low-wage workers, working poor in this community.